a constant and regular debate that is ongoing in my generation is the subject of screens. It's something that every parent that is my age, millennials and below, seem kind of caught in between a rock and a hard place. Because on the one hand, our lives are filled with them. We got smart televisions, smartphones, tablets, video games, and my generation is really the first one, I think, that actually grew up with these things in our homes. And so it's almost presumptive that they will be there. That in fact, many parents that are my age, their children's first introduction to things like video games is watching their parents play Xbox, PlayStation, or whatever. If you have like vintage gaming consoles in a box somewhere and you get them out, pretty much everyone has them. And so it's not a question of if, it's a question of when and how often and how much to allow kids, our children, to consume these things alongside of us and even without our supervision per se. And it's a difficult thing for every family to navigate, especially if you've got various different ages of children that have different capacities to wrestle with these things. And then also the matter of what are we modeling as adults. And so I have a few recommendations along these things to help you kind of maybe wrestle with those alongside me, because I have an almost 2-year-old and we're having to figure this out just as much as anyone else is. Alright? So the number one thing I would suggest is children don't need smart devices. They don't need them. They don't need smartphones especially, but they don't need tablets. They don't need these things. They don't need them. That in some ways it's for us as parents to make our lives easier, because if you're sitting in a doctor's office, or if you're at or if you're in the car and you're driving somewhere, or whatever it is you're doing, out at a restaurant or something, it is so easy and tempting, if the kid is getting a little upset or a little stir crazy or fussy or something, to just flick it to Disney Plus or the whatever it is and just hand them that smartphone or hand them whatever, and then they just get suckered into it. And they're addictive. There's no doubt about it. There's no room for disagreement about the fact that they are addictive for even full-grown adults. And so for children, it is far worse in that same way, as far as the addictive tendency that comes with them. And so it's a slippery slope that you almost can't come back up out of the ravine from. That once you start doing it 1 time or 2 times or 3 times or whatever, there's almost no coming back from it. And so the first thing is they don't need one of their own. They don't need it. There's no reason for anyone in adolescent stages to have a smartphone in their own name, you might want to say. They don't need it. If there is a context in which they need to be able to get immediate or spontaneous contact with others, give them a flip phone or give them a messaging phone with like a slide-out keyboard at most. And this isn't really even radical. I have a friend of mine that he's in his early 20s, and he just downgraded his cell phone from a smartphone slate form to a flip phone because of the fact that he recognized that he's in recovery of some other things, but he recognized that it was a constant umbilical cord of distraction in his life, interfering with his ability to get a lot of things done that he needed to be able to get done. And so he decided to cut that cord. And I know just from my record, or my experience, you might want to say, in youth ministry, I've seen so many already, and these things haven't been out that long. We're talking about 2007, the first iPhone dropped, I believe it was. And so these things have not been out that long. There hasn't been that many generations with these things in their pocket. And yet, as a youth leader, as a youth intern, as an associate youth pastor, etc., something that I have found is that every single junior high and high school kid that had a smartphone was also addicted to pornography, sexting their friends, sending and receiving sexually explicit photographs. 100%. It's not even marginal, it's not even 1 out of 10, it's not even some of the, like, you might want to say the edgy kids in the youth group that were doing this. I'm saying 100% was either looking up pornographic material on a regular basis, sending or receiving it, or personally creating it. Every single one of them. And then parents, they drag their kid in, sit them down, and of course they expect me to fix that kind of a problem. And quite frankly, the only way to do that is you've got to cut it off. That I was just reading a story about how in one of the Bible apps that's very popular, you're allowed to upload your own personal photos to the verse images that you can create in those for like sharing on social media, etc. These individuals, they were actually using that function as a means for sending sexually explicit photographs to and from one another in a clandestine manner. So, where there's a will, there's a way. And don't come at me with the idea that any of these junior high or high school kids are only using it for the Bible app, they're only using it for emergencies when they're driving or something. That's not happening. If you as a parent believe that, you are regrettably naive. You are making a very serious mistake if you put a smartphone in the hand of a pubescent individual. Just, that's plain and simple. I don't think there's any room to disagree with me about that, because I think most parents are aware of this. But again, going back to what I already mentioned, it's so tempting to just give kids what they want as a short-term solution to prevent temper tantrums, to prevent certain things, and it ends up becoming a down payment on enormous amounts of problems later. Don't give in. If your kid needs spontaneous communication, like let's say they're really busy, they got a lot of sports going on, or they drive or something like that, and you want to be able to get hold of them in an emergency, flip phone or a messaging phone with a keyboard, those are more than sufficient to be able to satisfy those needs without giving them access to the internet. Especially in this age in which most kids are now starting to get issued Chromebooks, books, etc. by their schools, which they're doing a lot of their homework on anyway. So they don't even need the internet access for that. Alright, so first of all, they don't need smart devices that are personally theirs or theirs alone. They don't need it. The next thing is you probably should not be leaving them unattended in the front of screens. This is something that's a little bit of a holdover for me, maybe from my very conservative upbringing, but we had limits on the amount of television we were allowed to watch, and there were certain shows we would watch on a weekly basis. Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, and then Saturday morning cartoons, college football. Sunday was NASCAR, the NFL, but that was kind of it. We really didn't watch a whole lot other than that because we didn't have cable. First of all, we didn't have like the elaborate satellite packages or anything. There really wasn't a whole lot to watch to begin with for us. We had basic broadcast television, but there just wasn't a lot on, and there wasn't a lot worth watching. And even if you have satellite, I think that you've had that conversation of you have all this stuff and nothing worth watching. And the same thing has bled over to streaming services, that there's so much things to choose from, you end up not choosing anything to watch, or watching something you've seen a dozen times, right? But you probably shouldn't be leaving your kids unattended with these things. And I would also suggest that you probably shouldn't be leaving your kids unattended with massive multiplayer online games, or with anything that involves interacting with other people, video game wise, on the internet. Probably shouldn't be. Just because I grew up, I was playing Counter-Strike back in the day, Team Fortress, and I know what those chats sound like. And they're not good for your child's emotional health. I guarantee you, doesn't matter how good of friends they are, it's not good for them. And most of the games that are out there, they're just not very spiritually healthy. So just all those things, just consider it. They probably shouldn't be left unattended, unsupervised, etc. But take that for a grain of salt. If you're gaming with your kids, a little bit different situation, but I would also even go as far as kids probably shouldn't be playing video games online at all. They probably shouldn't be. In fact, most of the games that have online connectivity, other than, like, let's say Minecraft or Rocket League, really are not for kids. You can't buy those games a lot without an ID in hand. So I would suggest that your kids probably shouldn't be playing those things either. But again, take it with a grain of salt. But as far as recommendations of things that are safe, for the most part, for kids to consume, I'm going to go with a few movies, a couple of TV shows, and a few video games that I have found that are safe, that can be consumed by anyone of any age, in any context, and people have a great time. Alright, so we're talking about movies first of all. Musicals being Les Miserables, Les Mis, Hugh Jackman, Anne Hathaway, and The Sound of Music are two of my personal favorites. I love musicals in general, but these are two of my favorites, and they are unashamedly Christian messaging all the way throughout. There's pretty much a cross in every scene of Les Mis. The turning point of the musical Les Mis is of a bishop choosing to forgive rather than punish, despite being viciously wronged by a person to whom he had been kind to. And then in The Sound of Music, it's the story about a nun who's made a governess of a family, and you have a teaching them how to kind of turning their hearts essentially back towards their, you wouldn't say overly strict, overbearing disciplinarian father, who is basically impacted from grief, has shut himself down because of grief, allows him to process that, allows the family to re-knit back together, learn to love again. It's really wholesome, plus a B-plot of resisting the Anschluss of the Third Reich just before World War II. Wholesome, wholesome, wholesome films. Another one would be Kevin Hart, starring in Fatherhood, story of a man whose wife dies just after labor, giving birth to his daughter, and being told left and right by everyone unanimously that he can't handle, that he's too immature to be a father. And he resolves in himself that he, in spite of that, being aware, I can't do this, but I'm gonna do it anyway, reinforcing the importance of father-daughter relationships in a very positive way. And number 4 is The Resurrection of Gavin Stone, which I've talked about before here. super good story of a child star who grows up and, as they typically do, is in trouble with the law and is assigned community service at a church in his hometown, and he essentially has to kind of blend in among all these Christians, and it's really good. Highly recommend. So 4 films worth watching that are totally clean, healthy, wholesome films that anybody could watch at any age and enjoy. 4. 2 shows. First is, if you haven't heard of it and you're a parent, I don't know what to tell you. You must be living under a rock of some kind. But Bluey is a series of shorts. Honestly, they're only about 8-minute long episodes, but it's the story of Australian blue healers. It's produced by the Australian BBC, and it's available on Disney Plus, and it's just fun. It's kids using their imagination with their parents, and they have rich emotional complexity to all of their characters, where they're learning how to interact with themselves and each other and the world around them. You have big lessons being learned about fairness, sharing, the importance of following rules, the importance of seeing each other as diverse and distinctive without discriminating, and appreciating the differences among others, like all that kind of stuff that you typically find in children's programming, without just a lot of the weird nonsense that is also in this kind of programming. It's fun for anybody. Any parent whose kid watches it will admit that they like it too. It's a good show. Just good show. And then the second one is The Mandalorian, another Disney Plus exclusive, and it's in the Star Wars universe, and it's the story about a bounty hunter Mandalorian named Din Djarin accidentally coming across a Force-sensitive youngling of the Yoda species, whatever they are, and chooses to make him into a foundling, takes him under his wing, and adopts him, and the two of them go on various adventures together, and cameos from Jar Jar Binks, the actor that plays him anyway, Ahsoka, Luke Skywalker, and Bo-Katan, Kryze. It's really good. Even Boba Fett is in it. But it's a good show, and it's fun, and there's very little in it that's objectionable, and it really balances the delicacy of the strong and dangerous masculine character with also being a gentle and caring paternal character. That these are not antithetical, but they're in fact two sides of the exact same coin. Balances them very well. So, good show. So, 4 movies, 2 TV shows, or series, I guess you could say, and then lastly, 1 video game that is totally safe. Now, of course, if you have kids and you want to be able to play video games with them, Mario Kart is an obvious fun choice, or Super Smash Brothers, if you can do that without breaking a controller or something. Easy things that are fun and don't take a lot of, you might say, of a learning curve to get into. But one thing, it has 0 violence, 0 sexual content, 0 innuendo, 0 coarse language. 0, like nothing in it objectionable at all, and yet it is extremely fun to play somehow, is SnowRunner. And it's available on nearly every platform. I have it on the Switch, and basically you are tasked with just driving a truck. Different kinds. You have from step-side square-body Chevy to massive big rigs to a twin steer with 2 axles in the front that turn at the same time. It's a serious, just simple game. You're just driving a truck through mud and snow and sleet and all kinds of different stuff and rain and washed out areas, and you just go around and you make deliveries from point A to point B as people ask you to do different things. And so it's not very complicated. You have the ability to explore the environment, finding upgrades for all of your trucks, and finding new trucks throughout the world, and just discovering new points of interest, etc. Like, it's just very simple, very relaxing in a lot of ways, and without anything objectionable. It's something that your kid can sit right beside you, and you have zero fear of them seeing or hearing anything that you would be afraid of them repeating to anyone, which is extremely rare in today's society. So, 1 video game, 2 series, and 4 films that are unmistakably clean, healthy for the whole family, and that everyone can enjoy together without you being afraid of them seeing or hearing something that you might regret later. And that makes it very easy for you to have some screen time while at the same time putting in reasonable limits about the kind of content that they are consuming.